Hi and welcome to my review of a 2023 R1250GS. This is in the trophy edition spec and a TE model, and it comes with, pretty much everything. I'm going to break this down to the 6 sections. The amazing, the exceptional, the very good, the could do better, the bad, and the truly awful. And it's kind of aimed at Triumph Tiger 1200 owners, any of the last generations, how this kind of compares to that. I've ridden a Triumph Tiger 1200 for the last 5 years, pretty much. That was the outgoing model that just finished 21-22, and I've ridden the new model as well. I've thrown away tons of footage that I've done on this video and tons of recording because I find out things about this bike as I go along. Some things I thought were one way turn up being the other way and all sorts. So it just shows maybe doing, who do you believe in a review? This is a tough one. You got the magazines and the vloggers who are kind of dependent on the manufacturers and the dealers. They don't want to say a load of shit stuff. Like, I can't wait till the GS 1300 comes out and all of a sudden all of the flaws of this bike come out in the road test. It's like, you never said that at the time. So, and this bike has some flaws, and I think it has a really, really bad one. There's something I hate about this bike, and I wouldn't buy it again because of it. But it does have some wonderful features as well. It's not all bad news. So if you're a Triumph Tiger owner and you're thinking of buying a GS or a second-hand 1250 or 1200 GS, well, actually, no, I'm going to say a 1250 GS, 21 year and onwards. That's the last time they really kind of changed this. So this is a 21, 22, 23 year model. They're all kind of the same after that. Stick around, watch my review and see what you think. I've ridden this for a month now. And some things are just pants, but some things are brilliant. So I'm going to leave the amazing and the truly awful to last. So let's start off on the exceptional. The exceptional part of this bike is the ergonomics and the seat height variations you can get. For instance, there's the low chassis version of this bike, which is 50 mil shorter than the standard bike, and that's made up of a cut in 30 mil in suspension travel front and rear, roughly down to the a millimeter here or there, and a 20 mil down on the seat. So a good 50 mil drop on the seat height. Now I have a 29-inch leg, so this suits me brilliantly, and it's the reason I didn't buy a Triumph Tiger 1200, the brand new one, the 2023 model, because it was just a bit too tall for me. And if I went for the lowered seat on it, which would have been a bit better, it just would have compromised my seat to peg distance a little bit, and I didn't have too much flexibility. I'd have to have that seat always in the low position. What the GS does for you is allow you to buy the low chassis version or the high chassis version, and then a combination of different seats. So you can achieve a combination of between 800 and 880 mil seat height, which is fantastic. Now what I've done is I bought the lower chassis version, taken off the low seat, which in fact was quite comfortable, I found, and put the standard seat back on. So I've taken my bike from 800 or 820 mil to 820 to 840 with the standard seat. So this seat has 2 positions, a high position at the front and a high position at the back, or a low position at the front and a low position at the back. Same as the Triumph Tiger, but what BMW supports is chopping and changing. So you can have a high at the front, low at the back, high at the back, low at the front. So you've got any combination of four ways of having this seat on the bike. The seat you have, apart from buying different seats, the actual seat you have, you can put on here 4 different ways. Now I found with the low seat and the standard seat, I preferred the seat tipping back ever so slightly. I just felt in the normal position I was too lent into the tank. But that's me ergonomically, because I have actually short arms along with my short legs. I'm 6 foot, but I do have short arms and short legs compared to my torso. So it's the combination of the lower chassis option, the normal regular bike, and the ability to swap the seat. That's nothing unusual, I suppose, but it's the ability to stick that seat in any way there. So ergonomically, this is absolutely brilliant. I give it 10 out of 10 for ergos. Now I've lowered that at the back slightly and I have short arms. My reach is a little bit stretched to the bars. It's not by much though. It's not by much, I will admit. And so I am going to bring these bars slightly back with a set of Wonderlook risers. But that's marginal really, that's just getting the last bit of comfort out of it. I could probably live without them. Being able to choose the standard seat on the low chassis model has retained a lovely peg to seat position for me. So it's a really comfortable seating position for me. So that's been brilliant. What about the very good points then? The clutch, it's exceptionally light, very, very nice. The gearbox clicks in beautifully when you're using the clutch. And because that clutch is so light, when you're using the hill hold, the release off that hill hold is dead easy. There's no lurch. On the old Gen 3 Tiger 1200, you could get a bit of a lurch coming off that hill hold. This is a smooth transition off that hill hold because the clutch is not only light, it's really progressive. So coming off that hill hold's brilliant. And just as an aside, on the hill hold, you can set it to auto. So if it notices you stop on an incline and you're holding the brake still a second after you've stopped, it'll automatically put the hill hold on for you. Some people might not like that and you can turn it off. This bike comes fitted with the adaptive front LED headlight. If you're a nighttime rider, it's exceptional. It's absolutely fantastic. I took it out for a nighttime country road ride, and the road was all over the place, left, right, up and down, up and down. The up and down movement of the headlight is fantastic. You can watch it in action, and it really does a brilliant job. You're riding down quite an undulating road. It illuminates the distance perfectly for you. You can see what's coming. The left, right highlighting the corners, that action's a little bit slower actually, but it does work. It does catch up with the bike and it does work. I had the cornering lights on my outgoing Triumph Tiger. I never ever noticed the difference with them ever. And I suspect you might not on the new Tiger. But the adaptive headlight on this, if you are a nighttime rider, fantastic. The spots on this, the auxiliary lights on this as well, are brilliant. Fantastically illuminate around the immediate vicinity of their bike. So unless you're in the outback and looking for kangaroos a kilometre down the road, the standard lights with the auxiliary lights on this would all you'd ever need at night time if you're trying to illuminate at night time. Now this has cruising lights on the front like my old Africa Twin used to have. The front indicators are permanently on. Some people argue that that shows that you might be indicating to drivers and they get pulled out on. I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt. I actually think it aids the visibility. In a sea of white lights at night especially, seeing a bike coming along with a couple of amber lights on it as well, I think highlights you and picks you out. So look, that's your own perspective, but I like them. But the lights on this are great. The lights are auto. There's no light switch to switch the lights on. So what it actually means here is you can have your daytime riding light on the front and you can have your auxiliary spots on and without having the light switch switched off, if you know what I mean. On the Triumph, if you want your DRL on full, you can't switch your auxiliary lights on unless you put your normal lights on, which then lowers the intensity of your DRL. So, and that's a regulation thing. I think what BMW have done, they've got around that a bit by saying, well, these aren't fog lights, they're just auxiliary lights. So they come on at the same time as the DRL, which the Triumph, well, at least my outgoing one, they wouldn't let you do that. On my Tiger 1200, I had the Triumph Alarm, which is just a data tool device. It self-arms, and there's no way of turning that self-arming off. It always armed, and every time you stop, 45 seconds later, the alarm starts beeping away, and at the most inopportune moments. You have the option here of not auto-arming the alarm on this, which is brilliant. And the alarm system is integrated into the dash, so you can go through the setup of your alarm system on your dash. Much, much better implementation of the alarm, by far. And it makes sense of having keyless control. On the Triumph, when you have keyless, there's almost no point if you have the alarm, because you have to have this thing with you to turn the alarm off when you go back to the bike. Here, I can just have the key in my pocket, go into that cafe, the bike's still immobilized, but I don't need the alarm on because it's out the window, I can see it there, you know, or I'm close by. So I can just come back, get on the bike and go. With Triumph, I have to get the keys out and I have to disable the alarm before I ride off. So the Triumph alarm makes the keyless ignition kind of a worthless feature. Even better than that though on the alarm, you can leave it to self-arm. Rock up to the bike with your wireless key in your pocket. it'll spot your wireless key and disarm itself. And then when you walk away, it'll self-arm itself without going through the big loud BP build-up like there's a nuclear bomb about to go off. So it'll arm and disarm with the key in your pocket. Excellent. The displays on these bikes are quite different. The dash on the Triumph is very much more minimalist, minimum information. I actually like that idea. This can get very busy. It's a bit of a McDonald's effect going on there. It is clear though, and it is a nice quality screen, and getting around the menus are intuitive enough, and setting up options and switching bits on and off and stuff like that is quite straightforward. It is quite simple on that, I will say. But I don't think the Triumph one is overly complicated either, so it's just what you prefer. The implementation of cruise control on the GS is much nicer than the Triumph. The Triumph was easy to activate on, but as most owners will probably know, it's quite a heavy spring underneath that rocker. So if you're in motorway traffic and you're constantly changing the speed up or down a kilometre or two, it gets quite tiresome on the old thumb. Oh, you poor man, yeah. It's a very, very light little paddle switch on the GS. It's a much nicer implementation of the cruise control, I think. Next up, the Vario panniers. Amongst the BMW community, these seem to be a bit of a Marmite thing. I decided to ditch the aluminium panniers that I had on the Tiger and not go aluminium on the GS. So I went with the BMW Vario. I did look around a lot for third-party plastic panniers and the likes, but by the time I'd actually have to buy the new racking and stuff like that, buying these that go directly on the bike, they weren't actually bad value for money. You can get a pair of these for about 750 euros, brand new now. They have a unique expansion capability, which is quite good. Oh, I bought some cheap in the bags. And they expand out. So fairly unique. Now, a word of warning, they're as heavy as an aluminium pannier. I was that close to buying soft luggage, some Lone Rider stuff. I like the look of it and whatnot. But you know, I think in busy Europe and stuff like that, soft luggage isn't a good idea. I was about to place an order for them, and then I saw one of the well-known female YouTubers get her stuff rifled through with her soft luggage panniers. And that convinced me to go for hard luggage. So I like the Vario. It's nice to have the option. With the Triumph, you don't have any option to have a bag without any scaffolding. You have to take one of your two GV options, and both need the scaffolding. So I like the fact that I can just take these off and ride with the bike nice and clear at the back. I do like the fact that it comes wired for the BMW sat nav. Now it's a Garmin device that they've branded. I think a lot of people are ditching that for their module that they put in there, and you can use your mobile phone with it as the nav device, which I think is a very good thing. But I've been a big TomTom fan for ages, so I just got a device to yank the power off that and power my TomTom, and that does me. So that's come in handy. That's another power, you know, that's another thing I don't have to wire in. So that one nice feature of the BMW app on your phone, if your phone is connected to the bike, when you're riding along, you get up the speed limits on the dash because it's using the map to pick out the speed limits and highlight them on the dash. I think that's a nice handy reminder to stop you breaking the speed limits in built up areas and stuff like that. I like that feature. So you don't have to be using the nav app to get that. Just have to have your phone connected, that's all. I have to say, generally the fit and finish of the bike is real high quality. It's great. I pick up in a few areas where it's a bit weak on later, but overall, you know, there are some lovely touches, like this aluminium plate is real aluminium. The logo is nice, kind of embossed feel to it. That's a nice look. This rail here, this handrail for the pillion, it's actually hollow plastic. Saves lots of weight, and in the middle of winter, if you've got a pillion in the back, this isn't a massive heatsink, a freezing cold piece of metal. I thought that was quite an inspired idea, I have to say. The paint jobs are fantastic. I will say, the choice of paint jobs on the GS and the GS Adventure, they're nice and bold, they're a bit different. It's almost like they got John Major to do the paint jobs for the Triumph Tigers. They're quite dull, So I do think BMW have gone an extra mile on the paint jobs, and I know a lot of them are stickers as well and stuff like that, but overall I think they're slightly more desirable. What about fit and finish? Well, this is a bit of a mixed bag actually. Inside of this cockpit here, down in here, it's really unfinished, and I mean, it's like that on purpose. You know, as a Triumph rider, you'll be used to a lovely enclosed, you know, plastic on the inside of all that. which makes it like a smooth section in there. Here, it's all exposed. All you're looking at in here is the inside of the plastic mouldings. I think it looks unfinished and a bit messy and cluttered, I will say. On the GS, there's a mini DIN socket on the side, and on the front, they've switched the DIN socket to a USB port. Now, personally, I'd prefer the DIN socket for much more power in my tank bag, and then I can choose to have USBs and stuff like that in my tank bag. But I realise a lot of people just like to plug in their phone somewhere handily and direct, and there's probably more of a demand for that. Personally, I think it's a step backwards, but there you go. The DIN port on the back here, it's quite cheap and nasty compared to the Triumph one, I will say. And I tried to power my heated vest with it, and the connection just wasn't reliable enough. It's a bit of a cheap connection. And I had a proper Optimate connector, DIN connector, and was powering my heated vest with it. But as I was riding along, when you use the connection, you might know on the Kai's heated gear, once the controller loses power, it switches off. So during one 3-hour ride, I had to stick my heated vest on about 6 times. So I dispensed with the DIN port. I can only see it being useful for an Optimate or a battery tender or something like that. I can't see myself using that in anger on the road, like I did quite a lot with the Tiger. The other thing about the Tiger front DIN port is that was connected directly to the back battery, so you could just take your tender, plug it in up there handily when you drove in. Also, air compressors tend to use about 10 amps. The front port in the Tiger was rated at 10 amps. You could plug in your tyre compressor directly to that, pump up your tyre if you had a puncture or anything like that, or if you've got a camping pump and stuff, you could handily just plug it directly into that 10 amp port. So I think the power options on this, the user power options, quite weak personally. As for the mirrors, they look nice, but I'm going to say they're just okay. They're quite small and quite a fair bit in, so you're getting a fair bit of your shoulders. Yeah, that's all I can say about them really. You know, they were vibration free, but they're quite small. You get less visibility out of them than you do in your Tiger. This bike is based on the Rally model, and then as I chose the lowering option and the pillion options, it changed out the Rally seat for these normal seats, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted. But it retains the Rally pegs. They're real cheap and nasty. Compared to what was on my Tiger XCA, which were forged and CNC machine pegs, these are really cheap and nasty. And if there's a bit of OCD about you, the left-hand peg is not perpendicular with the bike. It sticks forward. The right-hand peg is perpendicular to the chassis. The left-hand peg sticks forward. And I thought, oh, have I got a bent frame or a misshapen peg? I went back into the dealer at the first service, and they're all like that. So if there's a bit of OCD about you, you're going to hate that. But I think that's just poor quality. How long have they been making this bike? I do look at it every time I look at it and go, well, why didn't you just make that perpendicular like the one on the right-hand side? The rear pillion pegs as well, if you're a bit OCD, they don't go out perpendicular to the bike either. They kind of lean slightly back. It's not a dead important thing, but like, just make them so they're perpendicular. The switchgear on this bike, I think leaves a lot to be desired. This whizzy wheel is, I think it's kind of old-fashioned. It's getting around the menus is an unnecessary faff with going between the whizzy wheel and this button, and then back to the whizzy wheel and this button to go up and down, the whizzy wheel for this. I just find it's a bit outdated, and it takes up too much real estate and just makes a longer reach to the buttons. You find actually after a while you hardly ever use it, so I think it's a lot of real estate for something you don't use that often. The right hand switch gear, the mode button is a bit of an awkward angle, and changing modes I think is a bit awkward too. I just don't think that switch gear's thought out well at all. It's just been so long in the tooth, they've kind of not changed it. So yeah, let's hope they change that on the new bike. I'm sure they'll make it backlit, because I'm sure everyone talks about having it, backlit. The backlit switches on my Triumph, they were great, but I have to say, I never did a lot of nighttime riding, so if you don't do a lot of nighttime riding, it doesn't make any difference, but it's a nice thing to have. Like most of these things, it's a nice thing to have. It's a bragging right. But I do think the Triumph switchgear, apart from the cruise, is much, much better than the switchgear and this silly whizzy wheel thing. I know you're saying, oh, it's something you get used to. It's not really. A joystick or a D-pad is what every modern device uses, games, all sorts and stuff like that. I think we're much more in tune with that sort of thing rather than this whizzy wheel. And the fact that you have to combine that with another button just makes it a bit awkward. I was delighted when this bike came with Brembo brakes, front and rear, but their implementation is, it's completely different than on the Triumph, than on the outgoing Triumph and the new Triumph. The linked brakes on the outgoing Triumph and the new Triumph were absolutely fantastic. When you pulled that brake lever, you really felt like you were getting some incredible stopping power. The brakes, the Brembo brakes on this bike are spectacularly average. I will say, they're just average.
The Brembo on the front, it's not super snatchy, super bed in as soon as you touch the lever. So I don't know which caliper it is they're using or what master cylinder they're using, but it's not touch it and you're stopping a dime. My Tiger 1200, now that's the outgoing model, the 2018 to 2021, would have felt like a super Brembo. It seems to be set up a lot more muted on this bike. Not quite so fierce, but it just seems to be a kind of a milder setup on this.
Now you can get incredible stopping power out of them, but you really have to pull this lever. You really have to pull this lever to get it. So I don't know, maybe they're suited to off-road riding. They're kind of quite progressive, which maybe suits off-road riding, but look, we all know that 95% of people are never going to go off-road on this bike. I would have preferred the stopping braking power of the Tiger 1200 by quite some margin over this. I think the implementation of these brakes is quite poor. And that might please some of the people who had the Hayes brakes before. The thing about Brembo is they are a bit of bling. They are a bit of bling, but it's disappointing how they're implemented on this bike anyway. Possibly a change of pads might make them a bit sharper. Who knows? The dash has the built-in BMW navigation device. When you can find the address in the app and navigate to it, it's not that bad actually. It's pretty good for a quick point-to-point. And when a direction comes up on the screen, it overrides the main screen, brings it up, gives you the direction, you make that turn, whatever it may be, and then for the next 20 kilometers, it drops off the screen and you go back to the original screen. It's quite a nice implementation of it. Some little features that aren't great, when there's a roundabout, whether you're going left, right, straight on, or the fifth exit, you get one picture of a roundabout going straight through it. And then there's a little numeral next to it telling you which exit to take. So it would have been better had there been a picture of a roundabout, at least with an arrow going right off it or an arrow going left, so you can glance at it and say, right, I'm going right round that roundabout. So yeah, it's not a bad implementation, but I think it could have been a bit better in terms of the graphics on the screen. Searching for addresses, it doesn't use Google Maps. The Triumph system uses Google Maps on their similar system, and it's easier to find places that aren't quite so defined. I found a lot of places that, like, I wanted to go over to my accountant's, which is like 50 kilometers away, and I just couldn't find them on the search, and they have a normal address and everything, and it was in the end I just bloody gave up, you know. So it's not bad, but it's not brilliant. I have connected my Cardo to it, and what they want you to do is not connect your phone and connect your Cardo directly to the BMW app and the phone to the BMW app. What I found with that though is then I was trying to pair my Cardo with my buddy, and I couldn't use my Cardo app on my phone to pair with him. I had to remember the complex set of switches on my Cardo. After 15 minutes we gave up and just rode off. But you know, these apps, I'm sure they're all a bit similar. Like the amount of key presses I need to go through with the whizzy wheel and the menu buttons and stuff like this to get a song up and play it in my Cardo. It's a bit ridiculous though. It's just another thing to take your eyes off the road. Whereas on my Cardo, I can just press one button and play the music. And if I want to jog the song, tap it twice and jog the music without taking my eyes off the road. I think this is just overcomplicating the selection of a track. So that's perhaps not a criticism specifically of this system, I suppose, in that most bikes are going to be like that. But sometimes I think the connectivity of the phone to these sort of things is just a bit of a waste of time. My other bad point is this screen, well, more importantly, the mechanism for adjusting it. It's an overly complicated mechanism with a knob on the right-hand side, which is angled to your left hand, at least they thought of that, but it's quite stiff to move and takes forever. Like most bikes are now just a quick lift, pull up, pull down. It's overly complex, and I'm amazed that BMW have had this same mechanism for so long, because it's clunky as hell. And I found that when I got onto the motorway, I had the screen in the highest position, and with the wind pressure on the screen, I was trying to lower the screen, and I couldn't lower it because the wind pressure at 120 kilometers an hour on the screen just jammed the mechanism up. I couldn't move it at all, so it was kind of pointless. On the outgoing Gen 3, I had an electric adjuster, which you could adjust at any stage. That was fantastic. On the new Tiger, it's an easy up and down. This is overly complex, stiff, slow to do, a bit of a pain in the ass. It's really old-fashioned. The screen itself is fairly small. It doesn't give great wind protection and creates a lot of noise around the head. You can open your visor. On my Africa Twin, when if you had a peek and you looked over your shoulder, it'd nearly tear your neck off. On this, it doesn't do that. So there is something getting over my helmet with this in the highest position, even though it's not a very big screen. It does keep the pressure off your chest, so you can sit there all day at high speeds, but it's quite a noisy place to be. I've tried an extra lip on the front, and it's improved it slightly, but not that much. So I'm going to have to experiment more with a larger screen on this to match the great results I used to get on my Tiger. And it's a larger screen on the Tiger, and then a lip on the front, and I could sit there in total silence on the motorway. On the positive note on this screen, I actually quite like it. And I've been riding with this bike with the screen in the lowest position a lot on country roads, and I like it being out of the way, out of my line of sight. In fact, I'm well over my line of sight. So I'm actually enjoying a smaller, shorter screen, even though it might not be a sunny, hot day, but a day that's still nice enough to ride around with the screen almost completely out of the way. So I'm enjoying that. But overall, it's nothing to write home about. So some good points about that screen, but mainly I think it's a poor screen compared to the Tiger screen. One thing about the keyless ignition on this, you get one key from BMW, one wireless key, and then you get one plastic key, which you can use like the spare 2 Triumph metal keys, put them on the sensor and unlock the bike that way as well. So yeah, it's a bit cheapo. You get one tiny plastic key and one wireless key, and that's your lot. Okay, I've only got 2 categories left. The amazing and the truly awful. Now listen guys, I might be criticizing this bike in a few little places, you know, like don't get upset about it. It's not your firstborn child. If you're feeling particularly hurt because I said something nasty about your bike, you're 12 bloody years old. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's going to upset a lot of people. Yeah. My bike's perfect. No, it isn't. Okay, let's start with the amazing, because it is amazing. The amazing thing about this bike is its engine. It doesn't really matter that it makes 136 horsepower. It really doesn't matter. Because it's not about the horsepower, it's about the engine layout and where it puts its weight in this chassis. It actually makes this bike quite unique in that you can, look, I reckon I could get anywhere as fast on this bike as pretty much any other 1000cc bike. The only place this engine would let down this bike is on a drag strip, and that's not the real world. It's something that every GS rider knows about the way this bike goes around corners, goes around long bends, goes around short bends. You find yourself going around a bend and the radius is ever tightening, and you just kind of mind meld with the bike and lean a bit further and go around that bend. It's not as agile as a little 500 or anything like that. It's a big bike, it has mass. But the way you can turn this bike in an ever tightening radius or long radius turn, I won't say it's like on rails, it's like being on a Hot Wheels track.
By twisting this bike around the bends and all that sort of stuff, that's the kind of easy stuff. You can steer this bike with your hips, and that's why everyone buys it. It's the most amazing thing about the bike. You can look at sort of curves like this and just, you know, if it keeps tightening, you can just keep leaning, keep leaning, keep leaning. And it flatters average riders. I consider myself an average rider, nothing special, but this bike really flatters you.
And it's so overwhelming over the rest of the bike. I think what it does, it's so good, it gives a pass to a lot of the other failings on this bike, except for one. But and I'll go through that next. But the weight distribution of this bike is stunning, and the low speed maneuverability around town is fantastic. The high speed maneuverability out on the open road is fantastic, and it's all down to the engine, where it's placed and where its weight is. And all I'd say is, sometimes it's hard to explain, but having ridden this for a month now, oh, my automatic lights went off. Wave, oh, the sensor's over there. Let there be light. And this is why people buy a GS time and time and time again. Apart from the ergos, yet finding a bike in the first place to fit you, it's the feedback this bike gives you on the road and how it goes around the place, how it goes around bends. It's quite stunning, I will say. One last thing I want to put in the exceptional category is the service offering. When I told a few friends I was buying a BMW GS, a lot of them went, it's going to cost you a fortune in servicing, etc., etc. Well, it isn't. You can buy a pre-priced 3-year or 5-year service package from BMW, or your BMW dealer, I should say. So you can buy a 3-year, 30,000 kilometre package for €840 or £750 if it's the UK. I'm sure in the rest of Europe it's a similar price to €840. That includes all taxes, so sales tax or VAT as we use over here. But you can also choose a 5-year package, 50,000 kilometres or 30,000 miles, €1,210 here in Ireland, £1,090 in the UK. Again, that's everything. That's valve. So that 3-year package, you'll get a valve service out of that. The 5-year package, you'll get 2 valve services out of that. It includes all fluids, everything, absolutely everything. The only thing it doesn't include are consumables like tyres and brake pads, which is kind of normal, but it includes everything else. That's exceptional. That 5-year package that you can get on these is cheaper than my 1 valve service on my outgoing Triumph Tiger 1200, which I came out of kind of smarting quite a bit. It was one of the key factors as well why I looked at this bike, the service package that BMW offer, and that's in their configurator. So you can see it as you configure up a BMW bike. It's one of the options, a 3-year or a 5-year package, all inclusive, everything included. Now, don't be surprised if your dealer doesn't give you a free courtesy bike, because I'm sure BMW are taking a bit of a cut there, but I think it's unbeatable. And in the truly awful category is, as I think most BMW owners know, the quick shifter. It is pants, absolutely pants. In fact, it's more than pants. It's hopeless. You can get some use out of it at higher speeds and higher gears, but you're actually better off using the clutch in virtually all gears.
Look, that quick shifter's not letting me change down.
You can make yourself look a right dick on this bike using the quick shifter at low speeds around town. In fact, I wouldn't bother using it at all. It really is rubbish. It's rubbish.
Oh, fucking hell. That quick shifter's brutal. And I'm sure as I get used to it, they'll get better. I'm gonna have to get. Now that upshift is a bit. The upshift is a bit jerky. Okay, we'll get used to it. It does have that reputation though, and you can't watch a review of this bike without somebody say, "Ooh, that quick shifter's a bit dicky." But nothing prepares you for how crap it is after you've had a good one. The suspension on this bike is absolutely rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. When
People feel how great this bike rides on a good road and everything like that. I think some people attribute it to suspension. It's not. It's the engine layout, the weight distribution, the chassis and everything like that. It's not down to the suspension. Good roads, flatter, poor suspension. And if you rode this bike on good roads all the time, you would never come up against the limitation of this bike's suspension. The suspension on this bike is piss poor when it's taxed. It's absolutely awful. It doesn't have a clue what to do. You have rider modes, that's great, and I think there's 6 or 7 rider modes on this. I'll mainly use rain, road, and dynamic. In the road mode, when the going gets a bit tough, it's too springy, it's far too springy, underdamped, it doesn't know what to do with the road surface. I fully understand the suspension on this bike. When you choose a rider mode, it changes the damping on this bike. Between road, rain, eco and the likes of that, the difference is really marginal. In fact, you're kind of hard pressed to really notice what the difference is. But the difference between those and dynamic are quite pronounced. But if you put this bike in a dynamic rider mode, it does allow you to ride this bike quite fast and in a well-controlled fashion in terms of getting somewhere quickly, but in a very uncomfortable manner, I will say. Poor roads tax this bike's suspension, and I think the brain on this bike gets itself completely out of control. People following me have been telling me on a fast, rough road, my back wheel's leaving the road all the time. But what you've got to be careful on that bad, rough, undulating road, that you're tempted to put the rider mode into dynamic to control the front and rear suspension because it's springing about so much. But what you're actually doing as well is you're backing off on the traction control and some of the other rider aids on the bike. So what you're better off doing is leaving the bike in a road mode, in the rider mode, and then selecting the dynamic damping off the left-hand switch button. So the only input you have on this bike is between kind of normal and dynamic on the damping. You have no input into the damping of this bike. On a poor road, you're tempted to switch this into dynamic, but then you shake your fillings out your teeth. The high-speed damping is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. You go across a bad imperfection road and bang, you get it all. Bang, bang, bang. You're on a poor road for the next hour. It's really tiring. Your pillion's not going to thank you. So you switch it back into the road mode and that's it. Now you're going down the road like this, getting seasick. This computer on this bike doesn't know where to set the damping better than your head and what's happening to you. And that's what the Triumph Tigers give you. 9 levels of damping, and in every single rider mode, there's 9 levels of damping. Triumph set that rider level, or one of those 9 levels, as I suggested, this is where we think you should put the damping. But if it's not right for you, you just, on a joystick, knock it up or down a touch. You have no input onto the damping on this bike, virtually none. You can change from dynamic to road, that's your lot. This bike gets really out of shape. Now you might say, oh, I've never experienced that. You might never experience it if you ride on good roads. On good roads, you'd never know. On good roads, a Royal Enfield 650 rides perfectly. Poor roads tax poor suspension. Good roads flatter poor suspension. This bike is poorly suspended. Now, this model has been like this since 2021, 2022, 2023 models. Previous models, the setup might have been a bit different. I noticed on some of the older models, you had a suspension bias that would be between soft, normal and hard. Okay, that would be a bit like how Triumph do it, except Triumph give you 9 levels. At least you had 3 levels there. Now, this does auto preload in exactly the same way you get auto preload on a Triumph. They both do that in exactly the same way. This behind here is a swing arm position sensor, virtually identical to the way Triumph does it. In fact, it might even be the same switch at the back. But this is exactly how Triumph do it. On my outgoing Gen 3, it's just on the other side. It's just a rod connected to the swing arm. You sit on the bike, this gets pushed up and it recognizes how much the bike is sagging and it adds preload to counteract that weight. You put a pillion on, this gets pushed up further, it counteracts that by adding more preload again. So preload is fully automated on this, but that's been that way since about 2015 on a Triumph Tiger. So they're both great in that respect. This one will lower, you can lower the rear preload, you know, if you're on a bit of a gravelly car park or getting your pillion on and off. There's no such setting on the Triumph, but on the Triumph what you can do is put that into a off-road mode and it will lower that rear end for you. So you can do something similar there. So if you're used to the quality suspension on the Triumph Tiger 1200, you'll be really disappointed on this.
But not in comfort. This can't fucking cope. The suspension could not cope with that road back there. Its high-speed damping is absolutely rubbish. Not just a little bit crap, you know. Absolutely rubbish. It doesn't know what to do with these road surfaces. The high-speed damping is terrible. And if I came down this road in anything but bloody dynamic mode in the suspension, I'm in road mode in the actual rider mode, but suspension wise I have it set to dynamic. If I came down this with the suspension set to road mode, it'd just be bloody dangerous. This thing would be hopping all over the place, like madly underdamped. And okay, although this is a kind of a country road, you know, and it's undulations and stuff like that, it's just a road, you know. I shouldn't need to be in like the equivalent of a sport mode to make it across this road. But dynamically the chassis is brilliant at going down this road, but I'm getting shaken to bits. If you were doing this hour after hour, it'd be really tiring. But you can't afford to go to road mode on suspension. You'd be sick as a dog. I honestly think this suspension is flawed to shit. And what's happened is the chassis and the weight distribution of this bike has carried it all this way.
I'm going to do a separate video on the suspension on this, and maybe two different versions of it, a little 5-minute version and the long-winded director's cut, because I can be a bit low context and go on a bit. Specifically on the damping of this bike across the Wicklow Mountains. It's truly awful. If the GS 1300 when it comes out had the same suspension as this bike, not a chance in hell I'd buy it. I can get over the Wicklow Mountains in more comfort on my 1995 Triumph Daytona with manually adjustable suspension. And wait for it, I can get across the Wicklow Mountains on my CB 1100, which has no damping adjustment, in more comfort and at reasonable speed than this bike. The suspension is so poor on this bike, it's unbelievable. As I say, on a good road, you know no better. Because it's not suspension that's making you go around that corner, it's this chassis and this weight distribution that's making you go around that corner wonderfully. So on a good road, you may never experience what I'm talking about. On poor roads, and I like driving a lot on back country roads, this thing is awful. So that's it. Thinking about buying a 1250 GS from a Tiger. I'd have a test drive on a poor road away from the dealer. Okay, better get it. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Keep your head down. Yeah. Hopefully the dealer will follow. Yeah. Hopefully the dealer would have forgotten this video by the time we're going for my next service.